boys always have a good intention behind their behavior. They might not be very skilled at getting that need met or expressing that intention. Sometimes they do it in a way that's aggressive or violent or it seems controlling in return. But behind all of that, behind every behavior, behind your one kid hitting another, behind that, there's an intention that is valid and legitimate. They're trying to get a need met, even if it's a need for power and control. That's a legitimate need. And so when we try to tune into what's underneath the behavior, what is the intention behind it, and we start our conversation with them from there and not from the behavior itself, then they feel heard and they feel seen and they don't have to defend themselves.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life and marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest, Rachel Sklar. She is a parent coach who specializes in helping you raise boys who are kind, calm, cooperative, and connected. And as a mom with 2 boys and a girl, I noticed very quickly once my daughter came along how different it is to raise girls versus raising boys. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. And it was a shocker to me to be like, oh, you are a lot different, and we have to raise each of you very differently, obviously, because they're individuals. But I'm very excited to talk to you, Rachel, today because there is a lot of unlearning we have to do when it comes to raising boys, because generations prior are not the kind of boys that we want to be raising. And we are way more aware of things like consent and respect and the whole phrase of boys will be boys. Like, we're going to get into a whole lot of stuff throughout this talk. And I just want to thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you before we get started. How did you start as a parent coach? Like, what made you want to specialize in working with parents of boys? And how old are your kids? Where do you live? All the good stuff.
Yeah, so my boys are 17, 15, and 11, and I love being a boy mom. It's amazing. And I especially love teenage boys. I'm having a great time with that age. But when they were younger, I hated it. I was in a very, very dark place. I came to parenting having a lot of book knowledge, right? I came to parenting having taught parenting courses, and I did my master's thesis on the effectiveness of parent education, and I worked with parents of challenging kids in the foster care department. So when I became a mom, I thought I was going to be so good at it, you know? And I was pretty blindsided by how hard it was. And because at the time, I really didn't understand what I teach today, which is how to customize an approach for a child, right? And I didn't understand boys and what makes them unique. So when my second son came along, and he's completely different from my first son, the 2 of them, I say together, they were like Mentos and Coke, like separate
Explosion.
and delicious, but put them together and
That's a
and
great.
so it's kind of an explosion with each other. But I just went into a really, really dark place because I just have these memories of driving them to preschool and daycare and just sobbing and feeling so alone and not knowing what they needed and not knowing how to help them. And I ended up going back to school. I ended up training to be a parenting coach, because I knew that I would get parent coaching. I would get my own support, right? And so I spent a year training at the Parent Coaching Institute, and it was a huge shift for me because what I got out of that experience was that they were I was so busy looking outside of myself for answers. I was so busy, reading parenting books and, trolling the internet for answers and then feeling bad about myself when my techniques wouldn't work. I tried love and logic. I tried 1, 2, 3 magic. I tried rewards and consequences. I tried gentle parenting. None of it was working for me. And so I thought for sure there's something wrong with me, or for sure there's something wrong with my kids. They need assessments. And so when I started working with a parent coach and at the same time training to be a parent coach, a huge shift happened. What I got is that my kids, they have a set of strengths that I wasn't tuned into. There's something good and right about them that I could actually leverage and use and customize an approach that was unique for them. So I began to do that and everything changed. And so what I do now for my clients is I work with them on customizing an approach that's specific to the child's temperament, the child's interests, and the child's strengths, and to their family values, right? So I turned my parenting around so much in that time that I decided to go ahead and have another baby. Right? And the universe sent me a third boy. And so I was like, okay, I get it. I get it, universe. And that's when I decided to start specializing in boys and just teaching classes that were about raising boys. But really, it wasn't until the Me Too movement and and George Floyd, it was during the pandemic, George Floyd and school shootings, and just turning on the news any night of the week and going, oh, wow, we have a problem that I'm actually in a position to help solve. Because, world peace starts at home. I heard that from a colleague
Mm-hmm.
once. I was like, that's a good mantra. And so I made it my mission to start to work with the mother son relationship in particular, but just helping parents generally raise boys who are going to do better in the future.
I love that so much. And yeah, I mean, when we look at it that way, what we do at home really does make a huge difference, right? When we are able to help them navigate their emotions and express them in a healthy way and learn how to get along with people and get what they need in a strategic way, not like, so harsh and whatever, then they're going to be able to navigate the world better like that. And they're not going to explode and have temper tantrums as an adult and have all this violence and aggression. And I love what you do because depending on where you're starting from, how you were raised, you could be doing better than the previous generation, but it could still not be enough, right?
Thanks.
So thank goodness we have people like you who will help people who are struggling, who aren't coming from really good examples of how to do these things, and leapfrog, not just like, okay, I'm going to go from version 1.0 to 1.1, but rather maybe 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, whatever. So that's amazing.
And just to piggyback on what you're saying, I think that some of our traditional parenting approaches with boys actually teach them to wield power when they're not getting their way, because that's
Mm-hmm.
how we are with them, right? When I'm not
Yeah.
getting my way with my son, I'm looking for how I can wield power over him. I can give a consequence. I can change the rule. I can yell. I can use my power to try to manipulate and control him into cooperating. And so to me, it's no wonder that we have men in power doing that all the time,
That's a
right?
good point.
Men
Yeah.
who feel powerless and then are using that as a way to try to gain a sense of power.
Yes. I mean, I did read one time where our very first bullies are our parents. And I was like, oh, wow.
Mm,
Not that we like set out to do that, obviously, right? We're just trying to get them to listen and be good people. But the methods that we use aren't always the best way because we're not able to see long term how it's going to pan out for them because they really are sponges, right? And so it is very awakening reflection to have to be like, oh, shoot, like if I see my child doing this, and what am I doing that
right.
he's mirroring?
And that's
or
a
she's
lot, I
mirroring.
just want to acknowledge that that's a lot of pressure for parents. I mean,
Sure
I will
is.
never forget when my kids were little and I heard someone, a parent educator, I'm sure, say the things that you say to your child become their self-talk.
Yes.
And I was like, oh no, right?
I'm
This thing
screwed.
like, you're so rude. Then all of a sudden he's like, I'm so rude. I'm so rude. And that now becomes his identity, right? Or
Yeah.
say you're so mean or, you know, whatever, like any negative feedback that I give him is going to become what he says to himself. Now that's a lot of pressure, and I don't want to add pressure to our listeners, but to bring a level of mindfulness to the relationship, so that if you are saying those types of things, you're also repairing and recovering with your child and helping them develop a good self identity and self talk that says, hey, my bad, we don't want to have a relationship like that. And so it becomes, for me, raising boys becomes really about prioritizing our relationship with them over being right, so that they
Mm-hmm.
will do that with others.
Yeah.
And so that they'll
And
stick around to be in relationship with us over time, which is my number one goal.
yeah, no, absolutely. Because, like, I don't know about you, but I've heard for a really long time, like, when you have boys, be prepared for them to, flock to their significant others' families, right?
Mhm.
Whereas girls, like, they'll stick around because they're more inherently loyal, or we just raise them to be more of a nurturing, connection based person. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have two boys. And so I do feel that there is a shift now that we are nurturing our boys to prioritize connection a lot more. And we're doing better as parents to foster that connection and not just like go achieve something or go do something physical, but rather, hey, they do have that softer side to them too. It just hasn't been nurtured enough in previous generations. And we're the generation to kind of turn it upside down and be like, wait a minute, just as much as girls can be competitive and athletic and all these other things, and we're saying, hey, girls, you can do anything boys can do, we can do that to them too. We can say, hey, you get to have your feelings. You get to cry if you want. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean anything negative about you. You can be sensitive. That's okay. There's all kinds of boys and there's all kinds of girls. And we shouldn't be locked into like this, little box of, hey, this is your gender, stay in line. And I
Mhm.
love that. But also, it does make it a lot more complicated to raise them that way.
Well, because we're co-parenting with society, right? And they're getting a lot of
Mm-hmm.
messages from society about manning up and being tough. And
Ugh, I hate that.
even if we say that we are progressive and we're moving in a direction away from that, watch commercials any day of the week and you will see that we're not moving away from it, And so
Mm-hmm.
what they need to get from us at home is critical thinking. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so we can be there to help them look at media and ask themselves, what do they want me to believe about myself? And is it true? Right. And they're only going to listen to us, by the way, when we say things like that, if we have a safe relationship with them, if they see us as someone who's not trying to control them. Because particularly with strong willed boys, if they feel us trying to control them, trying to control their behavior, they are going to resist harder. That's actually human nature, right? We don't like
Yeah.
that feeling of someone trying to convince us that we're wrong and they're right. That makes us defensive. And so we have to play our cards right with our boys so that we don't put them on the defense. And that way we stay influential, right? Like you said, they will want to come back to their home base when they grow up and
Yes.
are partnered. They'll see us as a safe home base if we make ourselves as such. And so
Yeah.
but how do we do that when they're not cooperating or they're being aggressive or, their behavior does need to be quote unquote controlled, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
area that I specialize.
Yeah, I love that. So I do have personal experience with this because my middle child, he has sensory processing disorder.
Mhm.
And for the longest time, I was like, why is he so difficult? Not telling him that, but just like me and my husband talking, like, what the hell is going on? Why is he so different from our oldest, who is also neurodivergent, but different, right? And I'm like, why is everything, like every single task, even though it's like routine, why is it so challenging to get him to do this? But only to find out that he has overstimulation issues. He's sensory avoidant, and we had no idea. And only once we learned that and started taking him to occupational therapy that we understood that, oh, we need to talk differently to him. We need to be more creative about how we like get him to help participate in family things and take care of the house and da 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 da, right? And help the day go more smoothly. And it was a huge lesson for me and my husband on like, oh, we could do these things a lot better. And also him going to occupational therapy and just like working on some things like social emotional learning, more awareness and all of that, then he was able to become more verbal about, hey, I don't like that. And
Mm.
what was most helpful for us was not, again, pushing, because he is one to push back, right? Like, if he feels any ounce of like, hey, you're trying to control me, he's gonna be like, okay, go
Yep,
ahead.
that's
I'm gonna dig
exactly.
my heels in, right? I'm gonna become that boulder that you can't push. And so, what helped us was acknowledging, okay, I noticed that you don't want to do this.
Mhm.
Like, can you help me out? What's going on? What is it that you do want to do? Instead of, I'm going to start counting, or, like all the different ways that you can get your child to do something by instilling fear, which is how I was raised. I was
Mm.
raised with fear, right?
Mm.
If you don't do this, insert threat.
Mhm.
Or, the counting was very common in my household. And so that was like a huge shift for me because I have to work against what comes natural to me and choose what's more effective, which is something that's learned, right? And so I saw such a huge difference in my relationship with him, his relationship with his dad, how cooperative he is. Again, we have our on and off days, right? Like, as we all do, we're human. And it's like amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
It's like
So
night and day.
you're touching on something that I love to teach, which is this kind of thread of always say knowing why yields compassion.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yep.
understand where he's coming from and why he's struggling, and not he's not doing it on purpose, he's not doing it to get you
Right.
go, he's not trying to make you upset. When you understand where it's coming from, your compassion rises. And compassion and patience rise and fall together. So when your compassion
Yes.
goes out the window, your patience goes out the window. And so parents who say to me, well, how do I stay patient with my son? Say your access point to patience is compassion. And I always stand in this one, whether or not it's true, okay? I believe it's true, but whether or not it's true is that boys always have a good intention behind their behavior. They might not be very skilled at getting that need met or expressing that intention. Sometimes they do it in a way that's aggressive or violent or, seems controlling in return. But behind all of that, behind every behavior, behind your one kid hitting another, behind that, there's an intention that is valid and legitimate. They're trying to get a need met, even if it's a need for power and control. That's a legitimate need, right? And so when we try to tune in to what's underneath the behavior, what is the intention behind it? And we start our conversation with them from there and not from the behavior itself, then they feel heard and they feel seen and they don't have to defend themselves. I always say when a child doesn't feel heard or feel seen, then they'll amplify their behavior in order to get heard and seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that triggers us, and then we amplify our response to them or our default reaction, which is also often to yell, lose patience, punish. And then we get a trigger pile up. They're triggering me, that my trigger is
Yep.
triggering them, da da da. And parents are always really surprised when I say this, but I actually advise them to ignore the behavior
Mm-hmm.
and immediately go to where it might be coming from. Because once the child feels like you get it, then it renders that behavior, which is trying to tell you something, unnecessary for them. Right? Behavior is just trying to communicate something. And if the message isn't heard, then they'll amplify the behavior. And so with our boys, approaching them in this way, they're learning, again, the way that we approach them is going to be their future self-talk, right? So if we approach them in this way, they learn, oh, I'm not alone here. My parent is here to help me get this need met so that I don't have to hit, right? And that feeling of loneliness that they have, to me, that's the problem. To me, our boys in today's world feel pretty lonely. And the way that we have traditionally parented them has actually isolated them more. How often do we send them to their room when they're acting out? When in fact, the acting out is communicating to us, I feel disconnected. I need to be scooped up and brought in. But instead, we isolate them and we leave them alone with their pain. And of course, then that pain festers and it leads to more bad behavior.
Yeah. And, even though you're saying that this is for boys, this is actually true for all people, even adults,
yeah.
Right? Because we are just little kids in big bodies, right?
Yes.
And depending on how much work you've done on your own personal development, you could very much still be reacting like your younger self, but dealing with big person problems, right? Like marriages, like your parent-child relationship, with work, with your parents, with siblings, whatever. And it is so true. Like there's a phrase, seek to understand before being understood. If we approach people who we are in conflict with, hey, I need you to hear me. Like really, I need you to hear me. What do you think they're also doing? They're also saying, hey, I need you to hear me. Then you're going to end up having two different conversations rather than one conversation that you're having together that's dynamic and you're both there for each other, right? So, yeah,
Yes.
when you feel the need to be understood, it's going to be hard. It's going to take effort and practice for you to be like, wait, this isn't effective anymore. Let me drop down my shields and my wall, give them the microphone. And when they feel like, oh, you're giving me the microphone? Okay, let me drop my shields. Let me tell you how I feel. And then once they're all the way empty and thinking, okay, I've said what I needed to say, I got it off my chest, let me pass it back to you.
Right. Okay. I want to put a plug in for this book, and you might know it. How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It.
Yep.
This is the best parenting book I've ever read. It's a marriage book, but I learned so much about my boys and the way my boys' brains work. And what I got is that, we equally want to connect with each other, but how we go about it is different. And my husband and I read the book together, and I was like, this is great for our marriage. Love all the things we're getting at it, but I'm actually going to be applying this on my sons, and I read this many, many years ago when they were young, and now I recommend it all the time. And then I have parents say to me when they learn my boy mom method, they say to me, oh, well, this works on my husband. I'm like, well, it's just relationship science, right?
Yep.
But the thing that we have to understand is because the male brain and the female brain are a little bit different in the sense that the female brain, we know from studies from birth, tends to be more person oriented, more relational. And the boy brain tends to be more action oriented, right? Focused on shared interests, for example. And so our access point to connecting with our sons and our male partners is really about, connecting over shared interests and trusting that when we as women prioritize our relationship with them, they feel more safe. They feel more comfortable, right? They feel less defensive. As you were saying, if you're trying to convince somebody that they're wrong, nonviolent communication says convincing is violent, right?
Yes,
Right?
it
And
is.
it's tug of war. Like I'm over here with my point of view and you're over there with your point of view. And I'm like, come on over here to my point of view.
It's manipulation. Right? It is manipulation.
Yes. And our boys, they are definitely going to tug back. And that's why the most important thing you can do is learn how to sidestep a power struggle. Get out of a power struggle. And there's so many great ways, so many great scripts that we can say to our boys, and all the people in our lives that really communicate your point of view matters to me. And once I understand it, and I can actually help you articulate it because you're not trained in doing that right now. And I can tell you a script for how to do that. But I'll just tell you, I call it the yes, exactly script. Okay. This is where you say something to your child and their response is, yes, exactly. Right. And so, like, let's take an example. Let's say you've got a kid who is on screens. Okay. And it's dinner time and you want them off. Right. And they haven't done their homework yet. And so, you might tell them to get off screens and they might throw a fit, right? Now, our instinct is to use empathy. Well, I don't know if it's our instinct, but we get a lot of coaching in today's world around empathy, right? A lot of research around that. Oh, you're really sad, you're really frustrated, you're really mad at me right now. That's okay. It's okay to be mad, it's okay to cry. Fine. Maybe that will work on your son. But what happens in my private practice is my moms of strong-willed boys, they say, oh, that makes it worse. They hate that. Of course I'm mad. No, duh. Right? What do you, shut up,
Obviously.
I'm mad. This is my kids say, thanks, Captain Obvious. That's what my kids say to me. Thanks, Captain Obvious. Right? And so rather, instead of using what we call emotional empathy, I suggest cognitive empathy. And that's where you name the thoughts that the child is having so that their response, instead of saying, thanks, Captain Obvious, is going to be like, yes, exactly. Right. And so you might say, okay, you were in the middle of a show. I said you could have screen time. And then I told you had to stop before you know how the story ends. And we weren't supposed to have dinner till 6:20 and it's only 6:15. And so it makes sense that you would want to finish this right now. And it's not even fair because even though you have homework, it's easy for you and you can do it in 10 minutes after dinner, right? And now you might get it wrong and then they'll let you know. But if you help them articulate that point of view, you give words to it, you name it, and their response is, yes, exactly. The next thing you say is, oh, thank you for telling me that. Even though you're the one who just did the talking.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. I get that. Because now they feel like you get it and you're in their corner and now you're standing shoulder to shoulder with them. And then your next thing is, okay, we need to figure out a system for this because it's not working. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's good. It's not bad. There's no more moral problem here. It's just a system that's broken. And so we need to create a system that's a win-win for both of us. And that's, I think, if we can raise our boys in a world where we come together and we look at problems side by side and we create systems to solve them and we come up with win-win solutions. I mean, imagine the kind of future we would have. Imagine the kind of leaders that we would have. Imagine the kind of families that we would have if we were raising with that.
Yeah. In essence, you are fostering collaboration skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And that is so needed in all relationships, right? Like I actually have been through that exact scenario several times. And now we've come up with, okay, so when it's close to dinner time, we're going to end it early so that if you're in the middle of a game, you can finish it. And I won't be like, why am I here setting the table when I made the meal and I'm doing your chore and I'm sitting here by myself wondering if anyone's going to eat with me? Because I'm sure they don't want that either, right? But they don't want to be interrupted, which I get. I would hate to be interrupted in the middle of the game. I'd be like, wait, I was expecting to finish this. Right?
Or in the middle of an email,
Yeah. Or recording a podcast episode, right? It's especially relevant because my daughter was knocking on the door like, hey, there's a UPS driver. And I couldn't hear her. And I was like, dude, go away. I mean, in my head, I was saying, dude, go away. But yeah, I mean, I think what is the kicker is just understanding, okay, that's not working, right? I think just saying, okay, you have a valid point. And if I were in your position, I would hate that. And I also have a valid point. So clearly, like what we're doing right now, it ain't working. So let's figure out a way so that you're not being interrupted and we still get to have family time during our dinner, and it's not us spending time sitting there just eating as fast as we can because we can't stand each other right now because we're so annoyed with each other, right? Because that's not the point.
Exactly. Yes.
And it's so simple when you think about it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But it really does take someone sharing a script with you or an example with you for you to be like, oh, wait, I can apply that.
Right.
And you have free scripts, don't
I
you?
do. I do. And I just want to add here that it's not simple because nobody ever taught us how to
That's
teach
right.
a child problem solving, right? Like that's not a skill that we grew up learning or
Nope.
that, people always say there's no manual, but like, I mean, I've had to develop my own methods and coach and read and train myself on how to teach problem solving to a child. Nobody taught me that. I had to go learn that for myself. And so it's not surprising that we don't naturally know how to teach our children problem solving. And we're raised in a world where, controlling children is, I mean, you know, kind of what's expected. Yes, I do have scripts that I give away because I want as many parents to use them as possible. It's called 5 scripts to ending power struggles with boys, but it's actually 10 scripts. Like I've given you 5 bonus scripts. And in each
Bonus.
one, the first one is the yes, exactly script, right? And it explains why it works and then gives examples of you using it in life. And then of course you're going to say to me, well, what if the script doesn't work? Right. And so we have scripts for that.
Oh, I
Because
love it. Backup
I
scripts.
definitely we need them. Yeah, I see scripts all the time online, but this is a 10-page document. I mean, it really goes deeply um, into why this works. So because again, if you can understand why your child is resisting you, your patience is going to go up, right? That compassion and patience rise and fall together. And so and the idea of validating a child's thinking, excuse me, it doesn't stop there, right? We also need to express gratitude to our children for sharing with us. And we need to circle back with them over time. And timing is so important. Your timing is everything.
Hmm.
If you're trying to teach a lesson in the heat of a moment or lecturing,
Not effective.
their ears closed. Their ears are closed. It's just not the right time. And so, but I have ear opening scripts, that you can practice and put on your fridge.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me is timing because I didn't get good timing from my parents. It was always in the heat of the moment. And so I grew up thinking and applying this to all relationships. It's like, hey, if I'm bothered or upset, I gotta like bring it up right away.
Mhm.
And I thought that's how you have healthy relationships, but only after noticing very, very slowly that it wasn't effective. I was like, oh, shoot. And so that level of patience is something to be nurtured for sure, right? Like if you are impatient naturally, like me,
Mhm.
then I can assure you with practice, it does get easier because you start to notice and build up evidence in your mind. Oh, when I choose the right time, when I'm calmer, it actually is way more effective. They're not fighting back with you, they're listening. And then they can also have more space to be compassionate for your experience. Not that they're responsible for your feelings, but they can be more compassionate about the impact that they had with their actions. And
Mhm.
I think the difficult thing about being a parent is we are raising them, but we're also raising ourselves in the process,
Mhm.
right? And so having compassion for yourself, like, oops, that timing was right there. Let me do that over in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, compassion is a learned skill. It may come naturally to some temperament types, but it's also a learned skill. And so we need to nurture it. And I think you're talking right now about something I always think to myself about, falling off the wagon. I mean, it's like a yoga
Mm.
practice. You've been going to yoga a bunch and then all of a sudden you kind of stop because life got in the way. Well, you don't make yourself wrong for it. You just get back on the wagon. You just start going like any practice, and you'll never become an expert at it because there's always room to grow. And so just noticing that it's not about morality. It's not about good and bad, right and wrong. It's just about, oh, I fell off the patience wagon. I just have to get back on. You just have to notice it and get back on without beating ourselves up over it. And certainly, if our children are watching us beat ourselves up over mistakes that we've made, they're going to learn that from us as well.
Yeah. And I really, really like what you said about how you believe that they all have good intentions. It's just the behavior is much louder and not always the best way. And we kind of latch onto that because that's what we see at first, right? And if you are reactive, like I have grown up to be,
Mm-hmm.
it is difficult to kind of have the patience to see through it. But once you are able to, then again, like you said, with patience comes compassion. Like they work hand in hand. And I have seen how true that is because my son doesn't always have the best approach with his sister.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll sometimes use methods that look like he's trying to intimidate her or even bully her. But
Mm-hmm.
when you understand what he's trying to accomplish, it's like, oh, you're trying to keep her safe. Okay, try this next time because it's not made clear when you're doing that. It looks like you're trying to be mean to her, but I appreciate that you're looking out for her. How about you try and do this instead? I bet you she'll respond better. She'll listen more rather than trying to fight against you because she doesn't want to listen when someone says this to her.
Well, what you're doing there is you're focusing on what works and what doesn't work for him to
Mm-hmm.
get his way, you know?
Yes.
And when you focus on what works and what doesn't work, and you say, hey, I see what you're up to, and, that's not working. The
Yeah.
problem is that sometimes it does work for them. If one child is really after attention, right, the negative attention that they get is better than
It's
nothing.
still
Right?
tension. Yeah.
It's still attention. And so I'm thinking about my younger two, where my older one can similarly sort of, treat the younger one in a way that looks a lot like bullying. And when I think to myself, okay, what is the, good intention? I know the word good has a lot of weight on it, but when I think, what is his intention? What need is he trying to get met? Well, it's his need for play, for power. And the way that my younger son is responding is giving him that.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly the behavior is working to get him what he wants. The problem is that I know in his heart that he wants those things not at the expense of his brother.
Right.
Right. And so then I need to tune in with him and say, hey, I got that it's giving you what you want, right? You're getting power, you're getting play, you're watching your brother whine and fuss, and it's kind of funny for you. And, you know, um, and I wonder if there's a better way that you could get that going without compromising your younger brother's feelings of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he's confident, he's going to be a better person. Like he's just going to feel better about himself and he's going to be nicer to you. And, so it's just, having those kind of meta conversations with kids, they're never too young for us to start practicing that, to say, hey, let's like bird's
Yeah.
eye view this situation that just happened and see what
Yep.
everyone's point of view might be. And if we're really getting our long-term goal met.
That's a very interesting scenario. And I think it is common amongst boys because they do tend to like that feeling of like, I'm the best or like, I have power over someone. So, how did that situation turn out? Did you guys come up with a way for him to get that?
So, okay, so it's so interesting that you're saying it because I'll never forget the first class I went to about raising boys. The teacher said, boys seek to establish a pecking order.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at my kids and I see that playing out. I'm like, oh, he's just trying to establish that he's the one on top in the relationship.
Yes.
Right. And so it's an ongoing conversation. It's just funny because we had an incident last night that we got rehashed this morning. And, my husband was like, you're such a bully. And I was like, well, you're bullying him by telling him he's a bully, like it devolved. But
Yeah.
I'm not perfect. But, it's like, again, the timing is really important of this conversation. And by the way, I know a lot of you are listening to this saying, well, my boy would never sit through a conversation like that. And I can address that real quick too. But it's like to say to him, hey, listen, you are the big brother.
Mm-hmm.
You are on top in the pecking order. With great power comes great responsibility.
That's right.
Right? Super respectful. No.
Yep, Spider-Man.
Exactly. And so to say to him, like, you have power. Sometimes we call my middle son the deputy dad because he's always trying to parent his little brother. I'm like,
Oh,
thanks.
that's my son.
You know, and so we bring lightness, we bring levity, we bring humor to it, you know, and my
Yeah.
husband would be like, you're such a good deputy, you know. um, and so bring lightness and humor, but just reminding him, hey, like, you don't worry, you can relax, you are the big brother here. You know, we all know that he looks up to you, he actually worships the ground you walk on. Don't take that for granted. But I wanted to address this, and maybe this will be the last thing, that, you know, there are a lot of you out there who will say, oh, my son would never sit through a conversation like that. Or I try to talk to my son and he immediately shuts down. And there's a couple things that I have to say. One is that a lot of times the way we have historically approached our boys is shaming. And we don't mean to do it, but we say things like, you're older, you should know better. What's wrong with you? Why would you do that? You know? And those are conversation enders. And so if your boy is not wanting to be in conversation with you about a hard topic like that, it's a good opportunity to look inward and say, how might I have been approaching that conversation in the past that doesn't end well for him? Because if conversations don't end well for him or shine a light on his inadequacies or don't give him a feeling of power in the end, of course he doesn't want to be in that conversation with you. Of course, right? The other thing is that, you know, a lot of times we insist on eye contact because we think it's respectful. And we want our boys to look at us and we want them to learn to make eye contact with people in authority and with anyone in their lives because we have a lot of cultural baggage around respect with eye contact. But I want you to remember that in the animal kingdom, and we are animals, eye contact is used for threatening, you know,
Yes.
prey.
Confrontational.
Confrontational. And so a lot of times boys will be a lot more open. And you've noticed this in the car when you're not looking at each other, in
Oh,
the
yeah.
dark,
Walking.
walking, while you're playing basketball. I mean, that's what I do with my kids while we're looking at Pokemon cards together, you know? So
Yep.
be careful if you're insisting on these. Women want to connect through language, but they want to connect more through shared hobbies and interests.
I mean, look
So
at how they hang out with each other, right? They're
exactly.
like, sit
Exactly.
in a room, they don't talk, or they're like playing video games. It's usually pretty light. Whereas girls like to gather and like gossip or talk about deep things, and
Yeah, and we were
it's very
no
different.
different. I don't know about you, but I was hours on the telephone gabbing with my friends
Yeah.
while my brothers were outside playing basketball. And so, yes, I think that we as parents of boys are the best thing that we can do is we can share a hobby with our kid. I don't actually care about the NBA statistics, but I have become an expert in them over the years. And I don't
Yeah.
actually want to know how to solve a Rubik's Cube or, know everything about Pokemon or falconry or dart frogs or whatever, whatever the thing is of the month. But really taking an interest in our boys' hobbies is a great way to connect with them and build some clout with them that has
Yeah. Yeah.
to us and be more influential later.
Yeah, I love that. You have shared so much, and I want to thank you because you gave the listeners and myself some things to chew on and really contemplate because it really does take a different set of skills to raise boys because it doesn't come natural to us because it's hard to relate to, right? Like, but it doesn't mean that you can't get to the point where it's like, okay, this is just what we do. Like, this is my relationship with you, and then I have a different relationship with your sister, and it just is that way. Tell me more about your Boy Mom Academy. I just love the name, by the way.
Join the academy. The Boy Mom Academy is my way of training people in the Boy Mom method. I want everyone to become an expert in the Boy Mom method. And so it's a training program, it's a coaching program, it's a community to come together with other parents of boys. I know it's called the Boy Mom Academy. Dads are welcome. Moms are the ones who tend to really struggle with that relationship. And so, yes, so become an expert in the boy mom method, because you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your sons. It is going to set you up for success for the rest of their lives and yours, and especially in your relationship with them. And it's just one of the biggest honors of my life to be able to deliver this program and to run this academy. Yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. Before I let you go, I love to ask my guests a question so listeners can get to know you better. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, so I usually work off of a list that I ask my guests what they're comfortable with, but I have a different question for you, so I hope it's okay.
Okay.
So, of the hobbies that you have found yourself getting into to connect with your kids, what is one of the strangest ones?
This is a good question. This is a good question. During the pandemic, my middle son decided that he wanted to become a falconer. I did not
What
know
is
what.
that?
Yes, me too, right? That is someone who gets trained in owning a bird of prey and taking it out into the field to hunt for its own food, and training it to
Oh,
like fly off your glove, get its food, and then come back. And then you have in your home what's called a muse, which my son grew bamboo to build his own. And he wanted to get his hunting license. I mean, we are not a hunting family, but he wanted to get his hunting license, and he had to take an exam. And I fully dove into this with him, knowing full well it was pretty unrealistic and impractical. I mean, he was only about maybe 12 at the time. He wasn't even old enough.
okay.
But he was like, by the time I'm old enough, I'm going to get my hunting license. And I joined the falconry group on Facebook, and I started asking
Wow.
for him, and we started studying all the health problems that can happen with hawks, and now when we see a falcon we all get super excited. He's completely not into this hobby anymore, but for the maybe year that he was into it, I mean, for a kid who was struggling in school, he had no problem memorizing all of the facts that he
Oh,
needed to
yeah.
for the exam, right?
I believe it.
Yes. Pretty odd, but a great childhood memory. And the fact that I wasn't like, no, you can't do that. That's never going to happen. That's not realistic.
Yeah.
I don't want you to own a hawk. And then at one point he said to me, Mom, what's the likelihood that I'll actually follow through with this? What do you think? And I was like, I don't know. What percentage do you think? He was like, I'm going to give it 30%. And I think that's
Oh,
generous. And I was like, okay.
that's very honest.
I feel lucky he didn't follow through with it, but who am I to stop him if he has a dream?
Yeah. You know, I feel like the sooner we can help our kids discover who they are and nurture their interests, the better off they'll be. Because I feel like that wasn't nurtured when I grew up because it was all about practicality, which I understand based on how my mom grew up, why she was like that. And I don't blame her whatsoever. But it's like definitely a new world to navigate of like, hey, you're interested? Okay, let's go. So like
Mhm.
my son's in like a Lego league. I'm like, I don't what's a Lego league? Like I know Legos and I know
Mhm.
you could build sets, but like, oh, there's a thing that it combines with robotics and you can compete. Okay, let's do it. So now I get to go with him every Sunday and I'm there with him.
Yes, your relationship is better for it.
Oh, 100%. And it's another thing to talk about and ask about other than how was school, right? Like,
Okay,
cool. That gets
so
old.
so pro tip: the next time you're in a power struggle with him, or he's
Mm-hmm.
doing something that you're trying to connect and he's resisting you, change the subject. Oh,
Yep.
when's the next Lego League competition? Or oh, let's talk about Legos real quick. I mean, just change the subject, but with connection.
Yeah.
Redirection with connection, and then once you're in the door, he's going to be more open to the next thing you have to say. So then you can go, oh,
Yeah.
and by the way, that thing that you were doing before, not cool. Hey, what can we do
Yeah.
next time instead? Yeah.
Yeah. Especially when, and I'm very well versed with that because my son can spiral and just get stuck. Like it happened earlier today. I want spaghetti for lunch. Okay, well, I don't have time to cook spaghetti. And he just kept repeating, I want spaghetti. I want spaghetti. He was like on a loop.
Hmm.
And I was like, do you want watermelon too? I was going to cut some watermelon. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's done.
Yeah. You interrupted the cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But if you're
I'm
like,
like,
stop asking me, you've already asked, instant
yeah.
answer, what's
Which I
wrong?
would have been like in the past,
Mhm.
because I'm like, dude, I already said no. You heard my answer. Da 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 da. Because now I'm defending myself and I feel attacked, right? But no, it's not that they're trying to attack. He literally is struggling with being stuck in that thought of not getting what he wants because he set out this expectation that, oh, this is what I'm having for lunch.
Yep. Yep. You
So
threw him a bone.
anyway,
All right.
yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, it was so great talking to you. Listeners, if you have loved what Rachel has shared, which, hello, why wouldn't you? She's sharing how to have a better relationship with your boys. That's amazing. Who doesn't want that? Go check out her accounts. I'm going to leave all her information in the show notes. Go check out her 10 free scripts and her Boy Mom Academy. Okay, it sounds incredible. And I feel like the better you're equipped with how to navigate these challenges, the more peaceful and happy your house will feel, the less stress you feel. I mean, and plus, hello, you can use these same things in your marriage. Obviously, not talking to them like they're little kids, but you could still use the core foundational skills in all relationships. Rachel actually has a bonus that she wants to share with you if you do want to go check out Boy Mom Academy. Can you please share that?
Sure. Yeah, one of the bonuses that I offer to people who sign up, especially through a podcast like this, is something called the United Front Formula. And I created that because a lot of parents are saying to me, we're not on the same page. Like it doesn't matter how nicely I parent my child. If my partner is doing the complete opposite, then it's not working. And so I created the United Front Formula to help you parent as a team. And you get inside, you get sort of a way of exploring what are your strengths as a parent, what are your partner's strengths, how can you support each other in building on areas that you need to grow, and just really improving the communication between you so that you can come up with a strategy that gives you that united front. And by the way, I just want to share with you, Michelle, a myth. I don't think you have to be on the same page as your partner. I actually think that's a myth. I think that kids learn to adapt according
Mm-hmm.
to different parenting styles. And I think that they need various parenting styles. The question that confuses kids is who's in charge right now? So while I don't think you have to be on the same page, I do think kids need to know who's in charge and when. And that's something that I can support you in figuring out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't feel like you have to be on the same page with each approach. Your dynamic with your son is going to be different than your partner's dynamic with your son. And what I notice is relationships can struggle because the approach isn't the same. But as long as the outcome is what you both desire, sometimes it's our need to have control and for our partner to do what we're doing.
Mm.
But really, as long as it doesn't violate any boundaries you have with your child, with you, with your relationship, sometimes all you really need to do is just relinquish control and trust that they share the same values as you when it comes to parenting. Maybe it's a different approach, but that they get to do it their way. You get to do it your way. As long as the outcome is still like getting there, maybe you just need to walk away and not watch it happen.
Just like in parenting, if I say prioritize your relationship over being right with your child, the same applies with your partner. And when you do
Yep.
prioritize your relationship, you have tremendous influence.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
leverage as well.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. It's such a generous offer, and I can't wait to hear who takes advantage of that. So, until next time, thank you so much for making it all the way to the end. If you know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode in particular, please share it, okay? Because there is so much gold in this episode. And Rachel, you were so generous with what you shared. Thank you so much. And I'll catch you here on the next episode. Bye.
That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.